seeking to strengthen just our trade and investment ties with sub-Saharan Africa. We are doing this because it's a driver of global stability. We want to be partners with these leaders in this part of the world because together we can make the world a better place. And so trade is a key component of that, of course, because trade, especially since the beginning of the 20th century, has contributed to the greatest expansion of economic growth and opportunity, the broadest and deepest explosion of innovation, and the highest rate of poverty reduction in human history. And in the 21st century, the strategic interests that align with our commercial interests are perhaps even more critical than ever, particularly when you consider the shared threats operating in Africa's major economic centers, whether it's Boko Haram operating in sub-Saharan Africa, the largest economy, operating in Nigeria, the largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, whether it is Al-Shabaab, whose most horrific attack to date took place at the Westgate Mall in Kenya. Kenya has the second most developed financial markets on the continent, according to the World Economic Forum, or whether it is ISIL, who, according to recent reports, is currently engaging in recruitment efforts in South Africa, which, by the way, possesses sub-Saharan Africa's second largest economy. So because our commercial partnership has and will continue to expand the landscape for economic opportunity and prosperity in Africa, young Africans can achieve their professional goals or simply go to the movies. This will support countering violent extremism and help efforts that are underway on a security and foreign policy front that are designed to benefit both U.S. and African strategic interests. So this is all to say that it's been a very busy time for those of us involved with Africa at the Commerce Department. But I believe our efforts have indeed been absolutely critical. In the words of President Obama to those future leaders, and the words of President Kenyatta to President Obama, they point us towards a new paradigm. And a critical reason is because when it comes to the international system, African countries, more than any other time in history, are in fact key stakeholders in that system. And this speaks to what is perhaps the most important, crucial point of the trajectory that is taking place. A little more than 50 years ago, President John F. Kennedy said that he hoped that when the history of his time was written, they will record a more intimate and closer attachment year by year between your countries of Africa and this country of the United States. A little more than 50 years later, I think we see this in the policies that the Obama administration is now implementing and in the deepening of our commercial engagement. It is clear that the attachment is indeed more intimate and closer than it ever has been. And it is also clear that this attachment is more prosperous and consequential than it has ever been before. I look forward to working with all of you in continuing this trend, and I look forward to having a discussion with you this morning and your questions and observations about what the issues I've been privileged to be able to address here this morning. And thank you for listening so I could get the discussion started. Thank you. So I think we have a Q&A session. I think we have a little bit time built in. Don't be shy. Sir.
What impact on Africa and U.S. business do you see happening if the Exim Bank funding is not given?
Yeah, this is an extremely real risk and issue, and thank you for raising it. For those of you who are not familiar with this issue, when the United States promotes exports abroad, we often do so with the help of U.S. taxpayer money through a mechanism that is basically known as trade finance. And our trade finance arm is run out of something called the Export-Import Bank of the United States. And the Ex-Im Bank is actually, even though it uses taxpayer money, it actually is a profit-making, it makes profit for the U.S. taxpayer. It all runs in a way so well that there's a return on this trade finance, and it doesn't, so it's not, it's a very effective way of helping U.S. companies do business. It also needs to be said that basically every major market in the world, every major country in the world with whom we compete has a similar type of mechanism, whether it's China, Germany, France, that supports their exporters. And so we are in the midst of a major debate in Congress right now as to whether to continue with the Ex-Im Bank. It is currently not operating. Its operations have been suspended. And as a result, it cannot give money to major or even small U.S. companies for exports, to support their exports to Africa. This does not stop all exports. It may stop a major project that Ex-Im can provide better terms than a commercial bank on. And so with that background, the risk that this poses to our export portfolio is real. It's very real. And I'll just share with you an example, because it just happened during a trip that I took to Ethiopia in July with the president's delegation. For the first time in my entire experience in commerce, we were able to actually win a project for a small U.S. company in a tender for digital services in competition with the Chinese in Ethiopia. And we did this because we won on the merits. And after we won, the Ethiopian government actually reversed its decision and said, no, we were just kidding. We're going to give it to the Chinese after all. And this took place in the spring of this past year. And when they did that, when the Ethiopian government did that, they violated their own rules and regulations, and we saw that immediately. And we also knew that the President of the United States was going to be arriving in Ethiopia, within several weeks. And so we went right to the Ethiopians and said, look, this is a very bad signal. There's a lot of gray area here, and you don't want to have this thing taint the president's visit. And so we went and we appealed to them to reverse this decision to the Chinese and go back to the merits. And they did something as a result of our efforts that I've never seen any government do before, which is we thought they might just sort of stop the whole thing. Usually they'll just kill the whole tender at that point and start over again when nobody's looking. But in this case, they said, nope, you're right. We are taking the tender away from the Chinese competitor, and we're going to grant it to the U.S. company. And they did that right on the eve of the president's trip. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was a great victory. And they've reaffirmed it since the president's trip. Now, however, the deal, we may lose it because we don't have Ex-Im financing from Congress. And so for all of those of you who have a vested interest in more business between the U.S. and Africa, you should be paying attention to the issue that the gentleman has raised. The risks are real. Other deals will be lost for sure. GE just announced that they had to have to fire 500 people because they're not going to have Ex-Im financing for deals all over the world. They've had to downsize by 500 people. So this is real. There's a philosophical debate around it. I'm not purporting to say which side one should take, but and it's a real debate. However, we need to be consistent as a country in terms of what we're going to do. So Good question, thank you. Ma'am?
You mentioned the rule of law,
Mhm.
and how has the Commerce Department developed policy on global rule of law? And you also mentioned kind of a fair, like an even,
Right.
everyone having an even footing. Is there a note to the fact that folks in African countries are historically on unequal footing?
Right.
And does that inform policy on rule of law?
Yes, it does. Yes, that's a very good question. So, first of all, Commerce has a number of programs and initiatives globally designed to both level the playing field for U.S. companies and where there is no playing field, build that playing field. And we do that in the kind of work that I do every day in my meetings with government officials. I'm frequently asking them to, honor, make sure a contract is honored, make sure a regulation is enforced according to their own legislative guidance, make sure that Customs Bureau actually facilitates the transfer of goods across borders without delay and without extortion. And so this is the bread and butter of what the folks in my position and my team do every day. And then there are also technical assistance programs that we've developed under something called the Commercial Law and Development Program, which is intended to, basically what we do is we go out with very small grants and some of the world's best experts, and we help to build the foundation of commercial legal environments in countries. So we, for example, will help design a state-of-the-art public procurement program that allows a government to decide what goods and services to buy from the business community based on life cycle costs rather than on, who their friends are. And so we also, in the case of Sub-Saharan Africa, our CLDP program, which is the acronym, created a model power purchase agreement. A power purchase agreement, for those of you who don't know the utility industry, is the basis on which you can build a new independent power plant, because the agreement determines the costs and the tariffs that will be paid for energy over a period of time, among other things. And so we've developed a model working with sub-Saharan legal experts and governments on how to do that. And that's a very important example of how a rule of law a key component of a rule of law is standardization, right? Is doing everything the same way, in every opportunity. And so that's, the power purchase agreement is an example of that. If we don't do this in a way which helps a local entrepreneur in sub-Saharan Africa thrive, develop a great business idea, be able to protect that business idea, accumulate capital, protect that capital, then we will not succeed. We need, that is the true measure of our future ability to work as partners, and also to promote balanced and sustained growth within sub-Saharan Africa. I'm not saying this because it's altruistic. I'm saying it's because our economies won't grow together unless the level, that burgeoning middle class in sub-Saharan Africa is able to buy our goods and services. And they won't be able to buy our goods and services unless they are running successful businesses themselves. So what we're looking for here is a balanced economic growth strategy, and your question goes right to the heart of it, so thank you. Sir.
Yes, my question is a little bit close to that one. I know you're dealing with countries who already have a good financial market. It's more easy, I can say that, like Nigeria, South Africa,
Right.
Kenya, And now you're having Ethiopia coming on board, and also Rwanda. But I want to little bit hear from you how you can develop trade with country doesn't
Right.
have this kind of opportunity. They don't have a financial market. I'm talking about my country. DRC doesn't
Right.
have
Right.
a financial market. So you can say that, we don't know. So how you see this as a trade in the next future with the DRC
Right.
or the other Congo, Brazzaville? How you can see the future of those countries being part of this trade, your vision?
Right.
Yeah, how you can see this?
So I think the first thing to say is that
Again, President Obama got this extremely right from the beginning. I have to say, his vision in this area is as clear as could possibly be. And in his first term, he created a program called Trade Africa. And Trade Africa is designed to address what you're discussing, with the challenge that you're raising, by promoting better trade within sub-Saharan Africa, within specific, region by region, within sub-Saharan Africa, by helping build trade capacity. And that includes both hard and soft infrastructure. Hard infrastructure, obviously, is the roads and the terminals and the regulatory, the ability to basically put goods from one country to another. And as you know, that straightforward proposition of getting goods cross-border is very, very challenging. And so what the president is aiming to do is to build up local trade, because local trade is what will address the issue that you're discussing. We don't want to see an uneven situation. We don't want to see Nigeria and South Africa and Ethiopia be the only growth markets. We want to see balanced and sustained growth throughout the region. So this trade facilitation program is addressed to this. Let me give you an example, because it comes right out of the experience with that many of these countries face, which is what do they do with their agricultural products that they're making. And if you study the trends in this area, you know that almost 30% of local production in agribusiness commodities and goods is lost to perishability, and is lost to the market, and no one benefits from it, just because the infrastructure doesn't exist to transport them to the marketplace. And so the Commerce Department has launched something called the Cold Chain Initiative. Cold chain, yeah. And what it's designed to do is build a state-of-the-art cold chain, which is basically, the refrigerated warehouses and trucks, but also the information that a farmer needs to get his goods from production to market at the right price, using the right trade routes. And so this is all designed, this cold chain initiative is designed to create the infrastructure required to grow local economies and maximize the potential of agribusiness in this part of the world. And that affects all the countries that you've discussed. So we want this to work evenly. If it doesn't work evenly, it's not going to work at all. And just one more quick point, since it's implicit in what you raised, and that is health infrastructure. Part of what we have a major initiative underway right now to help build the supply chain for getting pharmaceutical goods to where they need to get, both in crisis situations like those represented by the Ebola crisis, but also in just sort of other areas as well. And so that's another fundamental that we, the U.S. government, are working on with local African governments to make sure that they have healthy citizens to run their businesses and develop their economies. And so I think the answer to your question is we're very mindful of the challenge you've laid out, so. Sir?
I think we have time for just one more.
Okay, okay. So- Sir.
Thank you. Mine is a follow-up to his question. If the Exim Bank is not being funded, I mean, what are there alternative strategies to protect the U.S. businessman coming into Africa? And if not, how is it easy for us to leverage workshops like this to actually do business, to create the enabling environment between American businessmen and African?
Right.
Yep.
Well, I think it's a tough question, and our Congress, needs to do some soul searching around this one, I think. And so I remain optimistic that they'll come to terms with this. However, your question is one that we think about every day. And one of the reasons we've designed this institutional investor initiative that I mentioned to you is that that's a new potential source of capital to address this kind of gap that may ensue if Exim doesn't get reauthorized. But what I would, and we will obviously work with every individual company that comes up against this, and we will help them in every way possible to find other sources. There are other government tools out there. There are other multilateral agencies. There's the World Bank, there's the African Development Bank, there's our own Overseas Private Investment Corporation. All of these provide some measure of public finance support. But trade finance is key, and if we are faced with a situation where we can't rely on it anymore, then I think we're going to have to we're going to have to come up with a new toolkit. We're going to have to come up with an even more robust set of tools, and we're going to have to do even better than we are at promoting what is the real solution to all this, which is more entrepreneurship. My own view of this is that if we send 10,000 American entrepreneurs to sub-Saharan Africa over the next 10 years, that will begin to solve all these issues, because they'll find so many partners among the young and growing populations in these markets. And they will develop the companies and the solutions and the wealth creation mechanisms that will make government irrelevant, that will make government not necessary. We all have to look to a point where we don't need government. That's the whole point, I think, of President Obama's goal to shift the paradigm from aid to trade.
Can I just ask one more very final question?
Sure.
Just to push on the point about the institutional investor initiative. I can say that Africa, and I can use Nigeria as an example, is building the structures, the infrastructure that is necessary for tapping into that initiative.
Right.
I can also say that the US is actually a bit lagging in terms of the response. Germany, for example, prior to the time we went to the market to raise our bond for real estate development, we're actually making inquiries. They've created a domestic currency vehicle that allows them to invest. The US will still be facing the problems of currency convertibility and the risk that carries. So I think this initiative needs to be accelerated in order to really take advantage, because the structures are there. I run the Nigeria Mortgage Refinance Company, the equivalent of Fannie Mae in the US, and we have built a structure that allows us to tap into the market. We've raised our first bond, it was oversubscribed. We're doing that initially on the back of government guarantees, but down the line, as we build our own credit rating and capacity to be AAA, at least to be rated like the country, we'll be able to go on our own steam. It's about a $2 billion initiative in the first window during the guarantee period, and we would like to see US involvement by bringing in patient capital, which is what we need. And this is what the institutional investors require. I'm hoping that can be accelerated.
Indeed, and that's exactly why we've started this institutional investor initiative, so that we can be there the next time you do that with real companies that can act in real time. But your leadership and your creativity is exactly what I was referring to when I said the solutions are actually being developed already. We just need to be, government needs to get everybody in the room and make sure that we can leverage these kinds of great initiatives. So I'd be glad to follow up with you on who we're going to be meeting with and the kinds of investors we hope to be able to bring to the table next time you do your one of your bonds. So, thank you. Good. All right, we're going a little bit long. Are we at time?
I just want to say a big thank you to DAS Matthew Murray. I would also like to ask him to convey our thanks to Secretary Penny Pritzker for letting him come to attend the conference and give us the keynote address. I would also like him to convey our thanks to Obama and the administration for these initiatives. Mr. Murray will still be here for a few more, he's not leaving immediately, so you will have the opportunity to meet him, and not everybody at the same time, hopefully, to ask some questions.